Sometimes you have to lose yourself before you can find anything. Deliverance wasn't just a survival thriller, it was a brutal experiment in fear, pain, and reality. Behind the camera, chaos erupted, actors injured, friendships shattered, and a small southern town forever changed by Hollywood's presence. There were no stunt doubles, little studio oversight, and danger lurking in every rapid. This isn't the movie you thought you knew. These are 20 weird facts about Deliverance, 1972, a story of madness, method, and mayhem on the river. And wait until you hear the bonus fact, a secret so unsettling it blurred the line between movie and reality. Let's dive in. No stunt doubles. Actors risked their lives. Unlike most Hollywood productions, Deliverance refused stunt doubles. Director John Boorman demanded authenticity. Burt Reynolds, Jon Voight, Ned Beatty, and Ronnie Cox all performed their own river runs, capsizes, and falls. The raging Chattahoochee River wasn't a controlled set. It was nature, unpredictable and unforgiving. Reynolds even insisted, "If I'm going to die, I want my death on film." That bravado almost cost him his life. During one terrifying stunt, his canoe flipped in a rapid, slamming him into jagged rocks. He crawled ashore, bruised and broken. When he asked how the scene looked on film, Boorman replied, "It looks like a dummy going over the falls." For Reynolds, the pain wasn't worth the shot, but the raw authenticity forever burned the sequence into cinematic history. What audiences didn't know? Those screams were real. Jon Voight scaled that cliff himself. One of the most harrowing moments shows Ed, played by Jon Voight, scaling a near-vertical cliff with bow in hand, desperate to kill his attacker. No harness, no net, no stuntman, just Voight, sweating and terrified, clinging to slick rocks as cameras rolled. Director John Boorman pushed him, saying the fear would read on screen. It did. Voight later admitted he felt paralyzed with dread during the climb, certain one wrong slip meant death. The scene's tension didn't need acting. His trembling hands and gasping breaths were real. Crew members below held their breath, unsure if they were filming a performance or a tragedy. Today, insurance policies would forbid it. But in 1972, with a modest budget and reckless ambition, the climb became one of cinema's most authentic portrayals of primal survival. The line between fiction and mortality vanished with every desperate grip. Burt Reynolds' stunt left him permanently injured. Burt Reynolds prided himself on being tough, but Deliverance left him scarred for life. During the infamous canoe over the falls stunt, he was launched into jagged rocks with bone-shattering force. His knee was so badly damaged that he walked with a limp for the rest of his life. Even surgeries couldn't repair the damage fully. Reynolds later admitted, "That one fall cost me more than any role I ever had." His macho decision to do his own stunts gave the film an unmatchable realism, but the price was devastating. On screen, it looks like a terrifying but clean wipeout. Off screen, it was a moment that redefined Reynolds' career, proving his dedication, but also his vulnerability. What audiences applauded as bravery was, in reality, a permanent sacrifice for cinematic truth. Deliverance didn't just bruise Reynolds, it haunted him physically forever. Ned Beatty's humiliation scene changed his life. The squeal like a pig sequence became one of the most infamous moments in movie history, and it nearly destroyed Ned Beatty. Cast as the city man Bobby, Beatty was subjected to a brutal assault scene that pushed him to his breaking point. Locals on set mocked him, and the humiliation followed him long after the film's release. Audiences heckled him in public with the infamous line, reducing a talented actor to a cruel punchline. Beatty later confessed the role made him a better actor, but at a devastating cost. He carried emotional scars from the experience, describing it as the most difficult thing I've ever done on film. What fans didn't see was the courage it took for him to endure such a harrowing scene in an era with little sensitivity to trauma. For Beatty, Deliverance was both a career breakthrough and a lifelong burden. Locals resented and exploited the film crew. Filming in rural Georgia brought Hollywood into a tight-knit southern community. Locals were cast as extras, including the infamous banjo-playing boy, Billy Redden. But many residents resented the intrusion. Rumors spread that the crew mocked their accents, exploited their poverty, and reinforced negative stereotypes of Appalachian people. Some locals embraced the fame, charging tourists for deliverance tours of the river. Others, however, felt betrayed. They believed the film stigmatized their region as violent and backward. Director John Boorman faced criticism for depicting Southerners as grotesque villains, while locals claimed the crew underestimated the social fallout. The banjo boy himself later admitted he never actually played the instrument. His hands were manipulated to fake it. For the community, Deliverance wasn't just a movie. It was a cultural wound that shaped how outsiders viewed them for decades. Hollywood had come and gone, but the resentment stayed. The dueling banjos scene almost didn't happen. The haunting dueling banjos sequence is one of the most iconic in film history. But behind the scenes, it was nearly cut. The banjo boy, played by local teenager Billy Redden, couldn't actually play. His hands were positioned by a hidden musician behind him, while another guitarist dubbed the sound. After the film's release, a bitter lawsuit erupted. Arthur "Guitar Boogie" Smith, who composed the piece in 1955, sued Warner Brothers for using it without credit. He eventually won a settlement, but his name was omitted from the original soundtrack. The irony? What became a timeless symbol of the movie almost never existed due to legal disputes and technical trickery. Viewers were mesmerized by the eerie harmony, but the reality was smoke, mirrors, and controversy. Without that one improvised moment of musical tension, Deliverance might not have seared so deeply into popular culture. Ronny Cox's big break came with a brutal twist. Ronny Cox, who played Drew, was a virtual unknown before Deliverance. The role launched his Hollywood career, but in the most brutal way. His character's shocking death scene wasn't scripted in detail. The filmmakers kept Cox in the dark, refusing to explain exactly how his demise would unfold. When Drew suddenly topples from the canoe, limp and lifeless, Cox's genuine confusion bleeds through the lens. He later revealed the lack of preparation made the moment eerily authentic. What audiences didn't realize was that Cox was literally improvising his reactions to an unknown fate. The terror was real. For Cox, Deliverance wasn't just a first big break, it was a baptism by fire, teaching him the ruthlessness of Hollywood's pursuit of realism. Not an easy audition, not a gentle start, just sudden death on a raging river. The studio tried to kill the film. Warner Brothers executives were deeply skeptical of Deliverance, a low-budget Southern survival thriller with no guaranteed stars. It didn't fit their blockbuster vision. They considered shelving it entirely after early dailies looked too raw and unsettling. Executives feared audiences would reject the disturbing violence and lack of polish. John Boorman fought fiercely, insisting authenticity was the point. The studio relented but slashed the budget, forcing cost-saving measures, like shooting entirely on location and skipping stunt doubles. Ironically, those restrictions gave the film its gritty power. What Warner Brothers wanted to bury became one of their biggest critical triumphs of the decade. The lesson? Not Hollywood gloss, but stripped-down realism shocked audiences into remembering it forever. The studio nearly smothered a classic in its cradle, but desperation birthed one of the rawest thrillers of the 1970s. The river tried to kill the crew. The Chattooga River wasn't a tame film set. It was a predator. Crew members constantly battled dangerous rapids, venomous snakes, and treacherous currents. Equipment was swept away mid-shoot, and cameras nearly drowned in the torrent. One crew member was bitten by a snake while setting up a shot, delaying filming for hours. Even the sound equipment malfunctioned in the humidity, forcing frantic improvisations. John Boorman insisted on shooting in natural light, which meant brutal schedules. Actors endured freezing morning waters and blistering afternoons. Locals warned the production that the river had claimed lives before, but Hollywood arrogance dismissed it. Every day on set was a gamble between art and disaster. When audiences gasped at the violence on screen, they didn't realize the real danger was behind the camera. Deliverance wasn't just about survival. It was survival. period. Burt Reynolds wanted it darker and paid the price. Burt Reynolds wasn't just acting tough, he wanted Deliverance to push even further into darkness. He clashed with John Boorman over how much violence and realism should be shown, arguing the film needed to be unflinching. During the infamous assault scene, Reynolds was so disturbed that he stormed off set, furious at how far the production pushed his co-star Ned Beatty. But his macho insistence on real stunts came back to haunt him when his injury nearly shut down the film. Reynolds later confessed, "I thought I was invincible, and Deliverance taught me I wasn't." He wanted authenticity at any cost. The film delivered, but at the expense of his own body and peace of mind. Sometimes, his friends joked, the river beat Burt harder than any villain ever could. A death scene that haunted the cast. Drew's death, played by Ronnie Cox, still unsettles audiences because of its ambiguity. Did he fall accidentally? Was he shot by an unseen attacker? John Boorman deliberately kept it vague, amplifying the paranoia. But what's less known is how deeply it haunted the cast. Cox, a newcomer, was given almost no direction. He was simply told to collapse mid-canoe. The suddenness rattled his fellow actors. Reynolds and Voight later admitted they were genuinely shaken watching Cox float lifeless downstream. The ambiguity infected the crew as well, sparking heated debates about whether Drew was murdered or simply broken by the river. That eerie uncertainty bled into the actors' performances, intensifying the dread. For the cast, it wasn't just a scene, it was a lingering ghost that followed them long after the camera stopped rolling. The river's mystery wasn't scripted, it was felt. The town of Rabun County regretted the spotlight. Deliverance put Rabun County, Georgia, on the map, but not in the way locals hoped. Tourists flooded the area, demanding squeal like a pig tours and mocking the community's accents. The Chattooga River became a mecca for canoeing, but it also brought accidents and deaths from inexperienced thrill seekers. Locals resented being portrayed as backward hillbillies, fueling decades of tension. Some embraced the film's notoriety for profit, but many felt humiliated. Even today, the movie casts a shadow over the region. Civic leaders have tried to highlight Rabun's natural beauty rather than its cinematic infamy, but the stigma sticks. What audiences didn't realize was that for the people who lived there, Deliverance wasn't entertainment, it was a scar. The film gave Hollywood glory, but left a small town with a reputation it never wanted and couldn't erase. A real drowning shadowed the chute. What audiences never saw was that the river almost claimed a life. During production, one crew member, tasked with handling equipment, slipped into a rapid and nearly drowned before being pulled out by locals. Rumors spread that another nearby drowning occurred during filming, though reports vary. The atmosphere on set turned grim, with actors suddenly aware they weren't just play-acting survival, they were tempting fate. John Boorman later admitted he underestimated the river's ferocity, confessing that insurance today would never allow what they attempted. The near tragedy bled into the film's tone, adding an unspoken tension. Every splash of water on screen carried the weight of real danger. Deliverance blurred reality and fiction, but in this case, reality was far darker. Survival wasn't just a theme, it was a daily necessity. The river wasn't a prop, it was a predator. Burt Reynolds and John Voight's rivalry. On screen, Lewis, Reynolds, and Ed, Voight, clash over leadership in the wilderness. Off screen, their rivalry simmered just as fiercely. Reynolds was the charismatic star in the making, while Voight was the more methodical, serious actor. Tensions flared when Reynolds mocked Voight's cautious approach to stunts, calling him too careful. Voight, in turn, bristled at Reynolds' bravado and need to dominate the set. Crew members noticed the friction, but also saw how it fueled their performances. The men's uneasy respect translated into palpable tension on film. Years later, Reynolds admitted he underestimated Voight's craft, saying, "John gave that movie its soul." What seemed like character conflict was partly real. The wilderness didn't just strip the characters bare, it exposed the actors too, turning professional jealousy into cinematic electricity that audiences still feel decades later. The squeal line was improvised. The most infamous line in Deliverance, "Squeal like a pig," wasn't in the script. James Dickey's novel described the assault in explicit, disturbing detail, but John Boorman feared filming it directly would be impossible. Actor Herbert "Cowboy" Coward, a local cast as one of the mountain men, improvised the taunt in the moment. The phrase chilled the set and scarred cinema forever. Ned Beatty, forced to endure the humiliation, later admitted the improvised cruelty cut deeper than anything written. The line became a pop culture echo chamber, shouted at Beatty in public for decades. What was meant as an improvised attempt to soften the novel's brutality became something arguably worse, an unforgettable scar on American cinema. Sometimes the scariest moments aren't carefully written. They're born in the raw improvisation of a dangerous set. James Dickey fought the director, literally. James Dickey, the poet who wrote the novel Deliverance, was proud of his work, but clashed violently with director John Boorman. Visiting the set drunk, Dickey berated Boorman for straying from the book's details. The confrontation escalated into a physical fight. Boorman ended up with a broken nose and 4 shattered teeth. Despite the brawl, Dickey was later given a cameo as the sheriff in the film's final scene. The irony? After all the hostility, his brief role delivered one of the most chilling lines. "Don't ever do nothing like this again. Don't come back up here." His presence became the film's haunting final note, a reminder that fiction and reality were never far apart. The fight symbolized the production's chaos, a battle between art and ego, words and images, ending in bruises both literal and lasting. The canoes became legendary artifacts. The battered canoes from Deliverance didn't just disappear after filming, they became macabre relics. Fans sought them out, treating them as haunted souvenirs of the film's brutality. One canoe was reportedly displayed in a Georgia shop, drawing tourists eager to pose with the vessel that carried Reynolds and Voight through death-defying rapids. Another was said to have rotted on a riverbank, abandoned like a ghost of the production. The battered wood symbolized the film itself, stripped of polish, scarred, and unforgettable. For the actors, those canoes weren't props. They were coffins on water. Every scrape against a rock was a reminder that one wrong move could sink them. That audiences now celebrate the canoes as pop culture artifacts only underscores how blurred the line became between Deliverance's fiction and its terrifying reality. The film sparked a real-life political scandal. Few films have had such bizarre real-world consequences. In Georgia, the movie's release coincided with debates about wilderness preservation. Politicians used Deliverance to argue both for and against development of the Chattooga River region. Conservationists insisted the movie proved the area's raw beauty must be protected. Developers countered that the tourism boom justified commercial expansion. The political feud turned ugly when reports surfaced of backroom deals involving land rights, with Deliverance cited in state legislature debates. The film wasn't just entertainment, it became a weapon in political battles over land, money, and image. What was meant as a survival story ignited a war over who controlled the wilderness. Hollywood had accidentally created a political flashpoint, proving movies can ripple far beyond the silver screen, reshaping communities, economies, and even laws. The cast was paid almost nothing. Despite its box office success, the actors were shockingly underpaid. Burt Reynolds received just $50,000, a fraction of what his rising stardom soon commanded. Jon Voight earned even less, while Ned Beatty and Ronnie Cox, virtual unknowns, were paid scale. There were no stunt bonuses, no danger pay, no Hollywood luxury. They slept in modest motels and endured grueling conditions with little compensation. When the film became a runaway success, earning over $46 million on a $2 million budget, bitterness simmered. Reynolds later joked, "We risked our lives for scale, and Warner Brothers made a fortune." What audiences didn't realize was that the realism they admired was partly born of desperation. There was no cushion, no glamour, just survival, for the characters on screen and the actors behind them. Deliverance's authenticity came at a bargain bin price. The ending was rewritten after test screenings. The original cut of Deliverance ended with Ed, Voight, jolting awake from a nightmare of the river, screaming in terror. Audiences in test screenings reacted with confusion and unease, some even laughing at the abruptness. John Borman re-edited the sequence, toning down the nightmare and emphasizing the sheriff's ominous warning instead. The changes made the ending more haunting, with the lingering sense of dread rather than shock. The revised finale gave the film its legendary staying power. Sometimes, restraint is scarier than excess. By holding back, Borman created a finale that haunted viewers for decades. The nightmare remained, but quieter, more insidious. Like the river itself, the horror didn't explode. It lingered, whispering in the subconscious. The change proved a single edit could transform a scene from forgettable to unforgettable. The banjo boy's life took a dark turn. Billy Redden, the boy who played the banjo, became an eerie symbol of deliverance. But his life after filming was far from Hollywood dreams. Redden never reaped major financial rewards and spent much of his life in poverty, working low-paying jobs around Rabun County. Tourists often recognized him and demanded he reenact the scene, a request he resented. He admitted in later interviews that the film typecast him into a grotesque caricature he never escaped. Decades later, he appeared briefly in Tim Burton's Big Fish, again cast in a role echoing his Deliverance character. For Redden, the banjo didn't bring fame, it brought a lifelong burden. The chilling image that defined the film's legacy left its performer trapped in a shadow he never asked for, proving not every legacy is golden. Some are curses. Deliverance wasn't just a movie, it was a collision of danger, ego, art, and exploitation. What we see on screen is raw terror, but behind the camera was something even more brutal: real injuries, real scars, real consequences. The legacy is complicated, part masterpiece, part nightmare, part cultural scar. And maybe that's why it endures. Because in Deliverance, survival wasn't just the story, it was the truth. If these secrets from the river shocked you, hit that like button, subscribe for more hidden Hollywood stories, and remember, in movies, like in rivers, the calmest waters often hide the deepest dangers.